happened to King Kong? I mean, seriously. We haven't had any new King Kong material in almost 10 years since Peter Jackson's movie. Nothing. Well, almost nothing. Kong Return to the Jungle doesn't count. Anyway, we haven't really had any new King Kong material in a long time. If you do count Kong Return to the Jungle, which is the animated movie based on the late 90s Kong cartoon, I guess that's, I mean, even then, that's 2008, that's still a long time, even if you count that. So, it's still a long time regardless. And even then, that was unwatchable, so... And even then, it's more closely connected to the cartoon than it is to King Kong in general. I'm more referring to keeping that franchise alive. And, it's such a bizarre problem because you look at stuff like Godzilla and even Gamera to a certain extent, though he's not as much of a shining example. Those franchises have been going on for decades and have managed to always keep themselves alive in some form or another. Godzilla, while he hasn't had a movie in 10 years coming up soon, the franchise has kept itself alive through video games, action figures, comic books, multiple different media. And Kong has always, very famously, had a problem with that. Kong has always had such a hard time being a franchise. You look at attempts to create a franchise out of him, and it's always so disappointing at how badly they fail. You look at stuff like King Kong Escapes, which is the closest thing to a franchise King Kong movie you could get, because it's not really a remake of the original, and it's trying to tell an original story that wasn't based... that has nothing to do with Marion C. Cooper's original concept for King Kong. But even then, it's all about the discovery of King Kong. At least it is in the American version. The Japanese version is a little bit iffy with that, because it's pretending it's a sequel to King Kong vs. Godzilla, even though it's really not. But despite that, it's still the character's first time discovering Kong and Skull Island or Faroe Island or Mondo Island, whatever it is. And it just gets boring to see that brought up so consistently. To see Kong constantly get rediscovered, reintroduced to people to the island, and it just gets boring to see a franchise going back to that same concept. And it's a good concept, it's worked for a lot of different things. Most versions of Kong do that part well, but it gets boring in a franchise situation. Now, I'm not saying Godzilla doesn't reboot all the time either, he does, but even when they do reboot, it's always to get to an original place, and if it's not that way, the movie's usually not very good. I think the exception to that would be Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, because that movie reboots so pointlessly, it's not even funny. It is so lucky that the remaining of the film is good, so that opening concept doesn't, like, make it boring. It's a really big exception to that rule. And Kong, I think that why his franchises have always failed is because he keeps rebooting. Every new version of Kong, for the most part, is separate from every other version. And it's different when you're remaking it. Like, Jackson's movie is a remake of the original. You can't really give that a sequel, because the original... to remake the original in that wholehearted of a way, you have to kill Kong for the message to go through. For the message to make sense and to be powerful, Kong has to die. And to a certain extent, to do a sequel to that is to ruin that original message, unless you look at Son of Kong the correct way, and then it kind of informs it. But in the context of Jackson's movie, Son of Kong would not be a good decision. But in terms of franchise material, you have to set up a situation in which a Kong franchise makes sense. The best examples of it I've seen have not been movies, because I think King Kong Escapes and King Kong Lives, the only real two attempts to make Kong a franchise, are A, not very good, and B, they still go back to that tired trope of discovering Kong for the first time. And I think that in order to create a franchise situation, you have to not streamline, you have to adapt the concept a little bit. I think the other really big example of a time where Kong was turned into a franchise was the late 90s, early 2000s cartoon series, Kong the Animated Series, which is a direct ripoff of Godzilla the series, but whatever. And while it doesn't hold up very well, it's a decent attempt to turn Kong into a franchise because it goes with the idea of the original happened for the most part the exact way we saw it, except we just cloned Kong. And I think if you let the original be as its own piece, like Godzilla, to do it in a way involving cloning is not a bad way to do it, because yes, it's science fiction, and the original King Kong is not really science fiction, but to bring in a sci-fi concept is not such an alien idea, because it's a giant gorilla fighting giant dinosaurs on an island that is lost in time. So, to bring in sci-fi concepts to turn it into a franchise, again, I point you to the Godzilla franchise, that's how it survived. And I think that in order to do it with Kong, you have to not be afraid to bring in those ideas. And I think the best way to do it now in our modern day is to do one of two things. You do another animated series, but you don't do it as a ripoff of another show, like Kong the Animated Series was. Or B, you do it as a comic book. I think comics is probably the better way to go, because Kong has never really had a great history with comics. I think I believe there was a comic book series in the 70s that didn't last very long. And then of course you had in the 90s, Dark Horse tried to get the rights to King Kong to do comics, and they wanted to, I believe they wanted to do a couple different crossovers. They wanted to do Tarzan versus King Kong, which would have been cool, the Predator versus King Kong, which would have been interesting, and the Aliens versus King Kong. All cool-ass ideas. And they didn't get the chance to do it because I think that the person who owns the rights to Kong just didn't want to give up the rights, which was weird, so it didn't end up happening, but that would have been awesome. See, that's it. Adapting the character, not changing the character, but adapting him for a franchise situation to bring in sci-fi concepts, to bring in new ideas. I think that is where King Kong needs to go. And again, I think the best way to do it is with comics right now. That's where Godzilla is finding a lot of success right now. I mean, Godzilla the Half-Century War, I think, is one of the best Godzilla stories ever told. And it only worked because it was a comic book. I mean, you could do it as an animated movie, but, you know, those franchises are not really ripe for animation right now because IDW is not really big enough yet to do animated features. But I think if IDW or Dark Horse, though Dark Horse, I mean, I'd like to see IDW get it just because of how well they're doing with Godzilla right now. But if Dark Horse got it, that'd be fine too. Just to keep King Kong alive. It's such a ripe franchise for picking, and no one is doing anything with it. I don't know who owns the rights to Kong right now, but fucking do something with it. It angers me as a King Kong fan to not see the character being used. So I think comics or another animated series, or even a rebooted film done the correct way, don't just remake the original again, just do something new with the franchise would be awesome. Or of course, the best thing to do, I think, would be to do a remake of King Kong vs. Godzilla and then give Kong his own franchise branched off of that film, so you just don't kill him in the end. I think that would be really, really cool. So, I didn't want this video to be too long. How long did we go? About 9 minutes, so that's pretty good, especially for me these days. So, I don't really have a lot else to say except bring back King Kong. There's a lot of potential in the character and in the universe. It's such a ripe thing to become franchised. And there's stuff out there that could be done justice with, like Kong, King of Skull Island, which is a book written in the continuity of the 33 film, which is a sequel. Just do something with the character. Anything. Just keep that franchise alive because, it's been done with Godzilla and I'd like to see it done with King Kong. You just have to not be afraid to adapt. Anyway, so that's really all I have to say. What do you guys think about keeping Kong alive? What are your ideas for keeping Kong alive? Just post those down in the comments, and hopefully the eighth wonder of the world will return one day soon. Anyway, so I'm Zazubaar. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Bill_Worster. Be sure to join Toho Nation on Facebook. Be sure to check out the weekly podcast on Sid Partou's channel, Geeky Gentleman. This week we had the special guest of the Real Manos, who has been on my channel quite a bit, and he's an awesome guy. And we talked about the topic of homosexuality in pop culture, so be sure to check that episode out. That should either be going up tonight or tomorrow during the day. I'm not sure what Ian's doing with it, so we'll see, but it's definitely going to come up this weekend. So be sure to check that out. Also, be sure to look out this weekend for the Sons of Serizawa podcast number 5. Most likely coming out tomorrow. We're recording it tonight, but if not, it will definitely be up by Monday, but I will try my level best to get it up tomorrow. Anyway, so I'm Bill Worster, aka Zazubaar. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys all soon.